If someone had told me that one day my only child would turn against me for money, I would have laughed in their face. But now, looking back, I can see how the signs were there all along, subtle, dangerous, ignored. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Margaret Williams, and I grew up in a small town just outside Cincinnati, Ohio. Life there was simple. Families left their doors unlocked, neighbors knew each other by name, and Sunday dinners were sacred. It was there I met Richard, the man who would change my life forever. Richard was everything a young woman could hope for, strong, dependable, and determined. He shook my father's hand the day we met, and I still remember my father whispering to me later, "That's a man you can trust." And trust him I did, for more than 40 years. We started with very little, just a small house and a dream. Richard built his construction company from the ground up, working long nights while I managed our home. Slowly, his business grew, and with it, our fortune. By the time he was in his 60s, Richard had turned that dream into an empire worth over $48 million. You'd think money like that would change people, but not Richard. Even with millions in the bank, he was happiest in the garage fixing a broken chair or sitting beside me in the garden, pulling weeds with dirt under his nails. Money never defined us. But it defined our son, David. I see that now. Back then, I thought I was giving him everything a boy could want, new toys, the best schools, a safe and happy home. But instead of gratitude, he learned greed. While Richard tried to teach him discipline, I shielded him too much. I thought love meant saying yes, when sometimes it should have meant saying no. Tell me, dear listener, have you ever looked at someone you love and realized, too late, that you were the one who created their worst habits? That's the guilt I live with. I didn't know it then, but the seeds of betrayal were already planted. They were watered by my kindness and grew in the shadow of our fortune. And one day, after Richard was gone, those seeds would bloom into something that nearly destroyed me. Because David wasn't just my son anymore, he was a man who believed everything I had should belong to him. It happened on a cold November morning, the kind of day when the sky looks heavy and gray, as if even heaven is holding its breath. Richard was pouring his coffee, humming the same old tune he always hummed when he was in a good mood. I was frying eggs. Ordinary, simple, nothing unusual. Then I heard the sound. A sharp gasp, the clatter of the mug hitting the floor. I turned around and saw him clutch his chest, his eyes wide with shock. In that single moment, my whole world came crashing down. I screamed his name, begged him to hold on, but by the time the ambulance came, Richard was already gone. 43 years of marriage, gone in less than a minute. Do you know what it feels like to lose half of yourself? It's like breathing, but never filling your lungs. It's like walking into an empty room where laughter should still echo. The days that followed blurred together. People brought casseroles, neighbors hugged me, and everyone said the same empty words, "He's in a better place now." But I didn't want him in a better place. I wanted him here, in our home, sitting at the kitchen table teasing me about burning the toast. Then came the letter from the lawyer. I didn't even want to go. My heart was still raw, but duty pulled me there. Sitting in that oak-paneled office, surrounded by books that smelled of dust and leather, I listened as Mr. Green adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Williams," he said, in that calm, professional voice, "your husband has left his entire estate to you. Valued at approximately $48 million. I stared at him, stunned. I thought Richard would have divided everything between me and our son. But no, he left it all to me. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel lucky. I felt a weight settle on my shoulders, heavier than any burden I had carried before. David was there too. The moment the words left the lawyer's mouth, his face turned red. His fist slammed down on the desk so hard the papers shook. Are you kidding me? I'm his son. I should get everything. She's old, she doesn't need it. Those words cut deeper than any knife. I sat frozen, trembling, while my lawyer calmly reminded him, your father's decision was final. David stormed out that day, cursing under his breath. And that was the moment I realized, I hadn't just lost my husband. I had lost my son too. Tell me, dear listener, if your child spoke to you like that, in the middle of your grief, would you still forgive them? I wish I could tell you that after that outburst, my son calmed down and came to his senses. But the truth is, that moment in the lawyer's office was just the beginning. For the rest of that week, David didn't call to check on me, didn't stop by to see how I was holding up, didn't even ask if I needed groceries. No, what I got instead were messages filled with anger. You stole what's mine. Dad would have wanted me to have it. You're too old to manage this kind of money. Every word was a dagger, each message colder than the last. This was my son, the baby I had held in my arms, the boy I had defended against bullies at school, the man I thought would one day care for me in my old age. And here he was, treating me like a thief in my own home. One evening, he showed up unannounced. No flowers, no hug, no mom, how are you holding up? Instead, he barged into my living room and went straight to the point. Mom, let's stop pretending. Transfer me 10 million. That's nothing compared to what you've got. I couldn't believe my ears. My husband had been gone for barely 2 weeks, and already my son was treating me like a bank account he could withdraw from. I sat there, stunned, clutching my teacup as if it could keep me steady. David, I said softly, your father trusted me to handle this. You'll be taken care of, but I can't just. He cut me off, his voice sharp and cruel. Don't give me that. I have bills. A house, cars, private school tuition for the kids. You think I can cover all that on my salary? I need this money, and I need it now. I looked into his eyes and saw no grief for his father, no compassion for my pain, only greed. In that moment, something inside me broke. David, I whispered, my voice trembling, you don't love me. You love what I can give you. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, jaw tight, waiting for me to fold. Tell me, dear listener, if your only child demanded millions from you like a stranger at gunpoint, would you give in? Or would you finally see the truth about the person they had become? Because that night, I saw my son clearly for the first time in my life. And what I saw terrified me. It didn't stop with that first confrontation. If anything, David's demands only grew louder, sharper, more humiliating. I had barely caught my breath from burying my husband when my son decided to treat me like an obstacle standing between him and his fortune. A week after his first outburst, he arrived at my house again, but this time he didn't come alone. He brought Stephanie, his wife, with him. She walked in with her head high, her designer purse hanging on her arm like a trophy. She didn't even offer me a hello. She just looked around my living room as if she were already measuring where she would place her new furniture. David didn't bother to knock. He stormed in, dragging Stephanie behind him, their 2 children left waiting in the car. Mom, we need to talk, he said coldly. I set down my teacup, my hands trembling. David, you can't just. Cut it out, he snapped. We're not here to play games. You've got Dad's money, 48 million. I want my share, and I want it now. Stephanie finally spoke, her voice smooth but full of venom. Margaret, you're not getting any younger. Managing all that money is stressful. David can handle it for you. It's the sensible thing to do. I looked at her carefully, the way a bird looks at a snake before it strikes. Her smile was polite, but her eyes told another story. They were sharp, hungry. She wanted that money as much as David did, maybe more. I tried to steady my voice. Your father trusted me. He knew what he was doing. You'll be provided for, David, but I can't just hand over millions because you say so. David leaned forward, his face red with anger. That's not good enough. I've got debts, Mom. The house, the cars, the kids' school. Do you expect me to live like some broke nobody while you sit on a fortune? I couldn't hold back anymore. Debts? David, you make 6 figures at the firm. How could you possibly be in debt? He looked away, muttering, it doesn't matter. Just transfer me 10 million. That's nothing to you. Stephanie crossed her arms, smirking as if victory was already theirs. And in that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't about family, or legacy, or even grief. This was about greed. Their eyes weren't on me, they were on the money. Tell me, dear listener, what would you do if the people you loved most began circling you like vultures, waiting to tear apart everything your husband built? Because that day, sitting in my own living room, I felt like the prey. After that ugly scene in my living room, I prayed it was over. I told myself maybe David just needed to cool off, that maybe grief was twisting his mind and making him lash out. But I was wrong. It was only the beginning. The phone call started first. Every morning, every night, sometimes in the middle of the day when he knew I'd be home alone. He never asked how I was feeling, never once said, Mom, are you eating? Do you need company? No, every call was about money. Mom, you don't need all that cash. You're too old. Just sign over part of it. Think about your grandchildren. Don't you want them to have a good life? If you loved me, you'd prove it by helping me. Each word was like a hook digging deeper into my heart. He twisted my love into a weapon. And you know what? For a moment, I almost gave in. Because what mother wants to hear her child question her love? But then I thought of Richard. My husband had worked himself to the bone to build this fortune, brick by brick, deal by deal. He didn't sweat through long nights so our son could blow millions on cars, houses, and God knows what else. He trusted me because he knew I'd protect his legacy. And I couldn't betray that trust, not even for my own son. When the calls didn't work, David switched to messages. Dozens of them. Some pleading, others cruel. You're being selfish. You're letting me drown while you sit on a mountain of gold. Don't make me do something drastic. Those words froze me. Don't make me do something drastic. What did that mean? Was he threatening me? A few nights later, I got my answer. I woke up to pounding on my front door, loud, angry, shaking the walls. It was midnight. I looked through the peephole, and there he was. My son. My flesh and blood. Yelling, demanding I let him in. Mom. Open the door. Stop ignoring me. If you don't give me what I want, I'll find another way. I stood there in the dark, my hand trembling on the lock. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. Tell me, dear listener, if your son stood outside your home in the middle of the night, threatening you for money, would you open the door? Or would you stand frozen like I did, realizing too late that love had turned into something dangerous? That night at the door, with David pounding and shouting, I finally understood something I never wanted to admit. My son wasn't asking anymore. He was threatening. The next morning, he called again. His voice was calm this time, but it was the kind of calm that comes before a storm. Mom, he said, this is your last chance. If you don't give me what I'm asking for, I'll go through the courts. I'll take everything. Don't make me do it. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Take everything? From his own mother? I hung up, but the fear lingered. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to appear at the window. It's a strange and painful thing when the person who once ran to you after nightmares becomes the nightmare himself. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my lawyer, Mr. Green, a kind man who had been with Richard for years. I told him everything. The calls. The threats. The way David was circling me like a hawk waiting for its prey. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Green sighed heavily. Mrs. Williams, he said, I need to prepare you. Your son could file a petition to declare you incompetent. If he convinces a judge that you're too old or too grief-stricken to manage your affairs, he could take control of the estate. The words made me dizzy. Incompetent? Me? I've seen it happen before, he said gently. Families tearing each other apart over money. It's ugly. If he goes down that road, we'll fight. But you need to be ready. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my empty house. Richard's picture was on the mantel, his smile frozen in time. I looked up at him, tears running down my face. Richard, I whispered, he's going to try to take everything from me. From us. And then, something shifted inside me. The grief that had weighed me down began to harden into something else, something sharper. I realized David had forgotten who raised him, who sacrificed for him, who gave him everything he ever had. He thought I was weak. He thought I was broken. But he was wrong. Tell me, dear listener, if your own child threatened to strip you of your dignity, would you surrender quietly? Or would you find the strength to fight back? It happened 2 weeks later. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to distract myself with a crossword puzzle, when I heard a knock at the door. For a moment, I thought it was a neighbor bringing me cookies, but when I opened it, I saw a man in a suit holding a folder. Mrs. Williams? He asked. Yes? He handed me the papers. You've been served. My stomach dropped. My hand shook as I opened the envelope and read the words that nearly stopped my heart: petition for guardianship. David had done it. He had actually filed to have me declared incompetent. I sank into a chair, the room spinning around me. There it was in black and white, his claim that I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. He wrote that I was unstable, grieving, and incapable of handling a multi-million-dollar estate. He even underlined the words, as if the judge needed extra convincing. I pressed my hands against my mouth, choking back tears. My son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the child I sang to sleep, was dragging me into court to strip me of everything. The humiliation spread quickly. Neighbors whispered. Friends who once came by every week suddenly avoided my calls. One even asked me, "Margaret, are you okay? We heard you're not well." The shame burned worse than fire. I called Mr. Green, barely able to get the words out. "He's filed, hasn't he?" "Yes," my lawyer said. "But don't panic. We'll fight this. We'll gather medical evaluations, financial records, anything we need to prove you're perfectly competent." But it wasn't just about competence anymore. It was about betrayal. Every time I looked at those papers, I didn't just see legal accusations. I saw my son's handwriting, his signature, his willingness to destroy me for money. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallway, staring at Richard's photograph on the wall. He had trusted me with everything, and now our own child was trying to tear it away. I whispered into the empty house, my voice shaking but firm, "David, you've made a mistake. You forgot who raised you. And you forgot what I'm capable of. Tell me, dear listener, what would you do if your only child stood before a judge and tried to prove you were insane, just to get their hands on money? Would you crumble under the shame, or would you rise and fight with every ounce of strength you had left?" The courthouse smelled of polish and paper, the kind of smell that makes you feel small before you've even taken your seat. I had never been inside a courtroom before. Yet there I was, not as a juror, not as a witness, but as the accused of being unfit to handle my own life. David sat on the other side of the room, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He didn't look at me once. His jaw was tight, his shoulders squared, as if he were fighting an enemy, not facing his own mother. The judge asked his side to present their case. That's when the lies began. First came Stephanie. She walked up to the stand, her heels clicking on the floor, her face painted with false concern. "Your Honor," she said softly, "I worry about Margaret. She forgets things. She repeats herself. Sometimes she doesn't even recognize the grandchildren." My mouth fell open. None of it was true. I had babysat those children myself. I had helped them with homework, cooked them dinner. Recognize them? They were my blood. Then came one of David's friends, a man I barely knew. He claimed he'd seen me confused at the grocery store, standing in the aisle for 10 minutes staring at a can of soup. The courtroom chuckled. My cheeks burned with shame. And then, the cruelest blow of all, a doctor I had never met took the stand. He said I showed early signs of dementia. He had never examined me. Never spoken to me. But David had paid him to say the words that might ruin my life. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, while strangers painted me as a fragile old woman, broken and incapable. The humiliation was unbearable. My heart pounded in my ears. I wanted to stand up and scream, "That's not true. I am not weak." But my lawyer touched my arm and whispered, "Stay calm. Let them dig their own grave." When it was finally my turn, I rose slowly, holding on to the railing. My voice shook, but my words were clear. "Your Honor, I may be grieving. I may be old. But I am not incompetent. My husband trusted me with his legacy because he knew my strength. And I will not let lies take that away." The judge studied me carefully. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. "Tell me, dear listener, what would you do if your own child stood in court and filled the air with lies about you? Would you sit quietly in shame, or would you rise and let the truth speak through your pain? For days, the courtroom felt like a stage where I was the fool, forced to sit while my own son dragged my name through the mud. But just when I thought the weight of the lies would crush me, my lawyer, Mr. Green, rose with a stack of papers in his hands and a fire in his eyes. "Your Honor," he began, "the question before us is not whether Mrs. Williams is grieving. That much is obvious. The question is whether she is incompetent. And we intend to prove she is not only capable, but more fit to manage this estate than her son." He turned toward David, and for the first time, my son shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mr. Green began laying out documents, bank statements, loan agreements, casino receipts. He showed the judge a picture I had never seen before: David at a poker table in Las Vegas, stacks of chips in front of him, smiling like a man who had just gambled away not only his money but his soul. "Mr. Williams," the lawyer said, "earns a six-figure salary at his firm. Yet he is drowning in debt, over $500,000 in loans, overdue credit cards, and gambling losses. This is the man who claims his mother is unfit to manage money?" The courtroom buzzed with whispers. I watched as David's face turned red, his jaw tightening. Stephanie shifted in her seat, her smirk fading. Then came the medical testimony. Unlike the doctor David had paid off, Mr. Green had arranged for me to be examined by 3 independent specialists. Each one testified clearly: I was of sound mind, grieving but entirely capable of handling my affairs. I wanted to cry with relief. For weeks, I had felt powerless, humiliated, painted as something I was not. But in that moment, the truth began to shine through the cracks. When Mr. Green finished, the judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He tapped his pen against the desk before finally speaking. "This court has heard enough. The petition to declare Mrs. Williams incompetent is dismissed." The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. My knees nearly gave out, but I held my head high. I turned to look at David, expecting him to soften, to maybe realize what he had done. Instead, his eyes burned with rage. "You humiliated me in court," he hissed under his breath. "This isn't over, Mom. That money is mine. Tell me, dear listener, if your own child lost in court and still dared to threaten you, would you forgive them? Or would you begin to plot the kind of revenge they'd never see coming? Winning the case should have felt like victory." The judge had dismissed David's lies, the humiliation in court had finally ended, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But when I woke the next morning, staring at the empty side of the bed where Richard once slept, I realized something: it wasn't over. David would come again. I saw it in his eyes when he whispered those words in the courtroom: "This isn't over." He was a wolf who had tasted blood, and no matter how many times he failed, he would circle back until he got what he wanted. That was the day I stopped waiting for peace and started planning my revenge. I called Mr. Green to my house. He sat in Richard's old study, the same room where my husband had once signed every contract, every deal. I looked the lawyer straight in the eye and said, "I want to rewrite my will." His eyebrows rose, but he nodded. "What are your wishes?" I took a deep breath. "Not a penny to David." The words tasted bitter, but also powerful. My son had chosen greed over family, betrayal over loyalty. And if he thought I would hand him millions after everything he had done, he was gravely mistaken. Instead, I directed the money where it would matter. Millions to the local hospital for a new children's wing. A scholarship fund in Richard's name, for hard-working kids who reminded me of the man I married. Donations to shelters for women and children, because I knew what it was to feel helpless. And most importantly, I wrote that the rest of the estate would pass directly to my grandchildren when they turned 25. They would be given a chance to build lives of their own, without David's claws in their backs. When I signed those papers, I felt Richard beside me. I could almost hear his voice whisper, "That's my girl." A week later, David found out. He barged into my house again, slamming the door behind him, his face twisted with rage. "You can't do this to me," he shouted. I stood tall, meeting his glare without flinching. For the first time in my life, I felt no fear. Only clarity. "I already have," I said calmly. "You wanted to take everything from me. Now I've made sure you'll never see a cent." His fist shook, his jaw clenched, but I didn't move. I wanted him to see it in my eyes. The weak, grieving mother he thought he could manipulate was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to defend what was hers. Tell me, dear listener, if you had a child who betrayed you this deeply, would you still leave them something out of pity? Or would you cut them out completely, as I did, and let your revenge speak long after you're gone? The day David found out about my new will was the day he truly lost whatever mask of decency he had left. He didn't come with polite words, or fake smiles, or even excuses. He came like a storm. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water, when the front door slammed so hard the walls shook. David stormed in, his face red, his fists balled at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. "You humiliated me in court," he spat. "And now you cut me out of the will? After everything I've done for this family?" I set my glass down slowly, my hand steady. "Everything you've done? David, all you've done is try to tear me down since your father passed. You lied about me in court. You tried to take what wasn't yours. And you think you deserve a reward for that?" His eyes burned with hatred. "That money is mine, Mom. It's my inheritance. You're just holding it hostage." "No," I said calmly, "it was your father's. And he trusted me with it. You've done nothing to earn it. Not one thing." His voice rose into a scream. "I need that money. I have debts. Do you want me to lose everything?" I stood taller than I ever had in my life, my grief hardening into steel. "Maybe you should lose everything. Maybe then you'll finally learn the value of what your father built." For a moment, silence filled the room. His fist shook. His chest heaved. I thought he might break something, maybe even strike me. But instead, he slammed his hand against the wall, leaving a dent in the plaster, and shouted, "You'll regret this, Mom. I swear, you'll regret this." But here's the truth, I didn't regret it. Not for a second. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady, my heart no longer afraid. "No, David. The only one who will regret anything is you. Because I've already made sure of it." That was the first time he saw it, the change in me. The grieving widow was gone. In her place stood a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. He left that day slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I stood in the silence afterward, shaken but resolute. For the first time, I realized that my revenge wasn't just about protecting the money, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Tell me, dear listener, if your child screamed in your face and promised you'd regret defending yourself, would you back down? Or would you stand your ground and let them taste the bitter fruit of their own choices? I always believed that when a storm comes, it doesn't just destroy one roof, it rips through the whole neighborhood. And that's exactly what happened after David's rage boiled over. The storm he unleashed didn't just hit me, it tore through his own home too. Word of the court case spread quickly. It's hard to keep secrets in a town where everyone knows everyone. His colleagues at the firm whispered behind his back. Clients began pulling away. People who once respected the successful lawyer with the wealthy parents started to see him for what he really was, a desperate man chasing money he hadn't earned. But the worst blow came from inside his own house. Stephanie, his wife, had stood beside him during the courtroom lies, smirking at me as though the inheritance was already hers. But greed has a funny way of turning people against each other when the prize slips out of reach. Not long after he lost the case, and after he discovered he was cut out of my will, Stephanie packed her bags. I'll never forget the day she came to me, her eyes sharp but her voice calm. "Margaret," she said, "I can't stay with a man who can't provide. I won't let my children live with his failures." She left him, taking the children with her. For all her faults, she wasn't stupid. She knew David's ship was sinking, and she wasn't about to go down with him. When I heard, I should have felt pity. After all, no mother wants to see her son lose his wife, his family, his reputation. But pity wasn't what I felt. I felt the weight of Richard's voice in my ear. Let him face the consequences of his choices. David spiraled quickly after that. Gambling more. Drinking more. Calling me in the middle of the night, slurring his words, blaming me for everything. "This is your fault, Mom," he shouted once over the phone. "You ruined me. If you'd just given me the money, none of this would have happened." But deep down, I knew the truth. He had ruined himself. My role was only to step out of the way and let him trip over the mess he created. Tell me, dear listener, if you watched your own child lose everything because of their greed, would you rush to rescue them? Or would you let them finally taste the bitter lesson they refused to learn any other way? Because I chose silence. And sometimes, silence is the most powerful revenge of all.